Hello, my name is Nancy Tucker, and I'm the Reference and Instruction Librarian at Jacksonville University. And in this video, I would like to show you the basics of APA. Let's go ahead and get started and just talk a little bit about APA. So what is APA and how you're going to use it? So what is APA? APA stands for the American Psychological Association. So the APA manual is the official citation style used by the American Psychological Association. It is the most commonly used citation style at JU. Nursing, business, kinesiology, and education, those all primarily use APA style, but always follow your professor's guidelines. So in the assignment, your professor will explain which citation style to use. Why are we going to use APA? Well, when you use APA to cite your sources, it allows the readers to be able to reference your sources. So if someone sees a source and they want to look it up and maybe use it for their own source, or your professor will a lot of times check your sources to make sure that you're citing them properly or that you're interpreting the information correctly. So it allows your readers to look up your sources. It also provides a consistent format, so everyone in your class will be citing the same way. So it's easy for your professor to make sure that all the papers are cited correctly in APA format and that everyone's using the same style, which makes it very convenient. It also gives you credibility, so anytime you are it is very helpful to back up your opinion with actual research. So you're saying, don't take my word for it. Here is some information to back up my opinion, to support my opinion. So that will be in the form of statistics, facts, research, credible research in the topic of your paper. And then finally, it protects you from plagiarism. So at JU, we do have an academic misconduct policy. But in order to avoid plagiarism, all you have to do is cite your sources, and you have to cite them properly. So always make sure that you're citing your sources. You won't get in trouble for citing too much information probably, but you will get in trouble if you don't cite enough information. So make sure you're citing your sources in APA format. And some students don't realize that even if it's a presentation, like a PowerPoint presentation or a speech, you still have to cite your sources throughout your presentation. So make sure you're always citing your sources. So when you start your paper, when you're formatting your paper, you want to make sure that it's double spaced, Times New Roman, 1-inch margins, and then you're always going to cite your sources twice. You're going to cite them throughout the text, so anytime you mention a source, whether you're using a direct quote, whether you're paraphrasing the source or summarizing the source, you do want to use the in-text citations, and we'll look at that in just a little bit. But the second place you want to cite your sources is on the references list. So at the end of your paper, you'll have an entire list of all of your sources, and I will show you an example of that in a little bit. But if you have questions about formatting your paper, check out page 44 and 45 of the APA manual. We also have a sample paper on our research guide. So the first page of your paper will be your title page. So in the header, you will have the page number. So the first page will be page number 1. So put a number 1. You don't have to put P period or anything like that. Just put the number. Now, in the previous edition of APA, you were required to put a header, a running head. But in the 7th edition, the running head is not required for student papers. Then you're going to have the title of your paper. It's going to be centered in the upper half of the page. Then you're going to have your name. You're going to have your department and Jacksonville University. Then you're going to have your course number and the course name. You're going to put your professor's name, and then you're going to put the date. So that's the primary format for student papers in APA format. And if you need to look up that to format your paper, check out page 61 of the APA manual. So here are some examples of in-text citations. For a typical in-text citation, it's the author's last name, comma, and then the year. But if you're using a specific part of a source, it's going to be author's last name, comma, year, comma, and then the page number or the page numbers. So make sure you include that in your citation. Sometimes there's no author, and if there's no author, you'll just use a shortened version of the title and then the year. But keep in mind, sometimes the title is going to be in italics, and sometimes it's going to be in quotation marks. So the rule is if your work is part of a larger work, then you would put it in quotation marks. So for instance, a chapter is part of a book, so the chapter in quotation marks. But if you're citing the entire book, you would italicize the name of the book. So basically for the in-text, you just follow the example that's in the references list. So if your title is italicized in the references list, you'll italicize it in your in-text. If it's in quotation marks in your references list, you'll put it in quotation marks in your in-text, because the in-text is basically a short version of the citation where whoever's reading your paper can go and find the entire citation on your references list. So it just gives enough information for the reader to find that source on your references list. The last example is if there's no date. If there's no date, just skip it. So we're just going to have the author's last name. And typically in APA, you just cite what you see. So if you don't see something, don't cite it. So if there's no date, just leave it out. This is an example of the last page of your paper, which will be your references list. So here we've got lots of different references. One mistake that students frequently make is they will not alphabetize this list. They'll just put it in order as the sources appear in the paper, and that is not correct. You want to make sure that you are citing these in alphabetical order. So we've got the A's, the B's, and the C's. So all alphabetical order. Make sure you're putting those in alphabetical order. Let's see. Also, the title of your source will be in sentence case. So you would only capitalize the first letter of the first word in the title and the subtitle, plus any proper nouns. So a lot of times students will just copy the information from their source. Maybe if it's a database, they'll copy the title from the database, but that will not be proper APA citation style, because you have to put that in sentence case. Sometimes an article will be in all caps in the databases, and the student will just copy and paste that, but you don't want to put your title in all caps. It's a quick way to get points taken off of your paper. So make sure you're using sentence case, as you can see in these examples. Those are all in sentence case. All right, so let's look at some examples. So here's an example of how to cite a print book. So for a print book, you have the author's last name, the first initial, period, middle initial, period. Then you'll have your year in parentheses, period. The period does go after the parentheses. Then you'll have the title of your book in italics. This is an example if you're citing the entire book. Remember sentence case for the title. And then the last foot is the publisher. Back in the old edition of APA, you had to put the city of the publisher, but in the new edition, you do not have to put the city. Now, if it was an ebook, you would just want to put the DOI after the publisher, which is a digital object identifier. But if there's no DOI, leave it out. Remember, cite what you see. If there's no DOI, leave it out. But if it's a print book, there's probably not going to be a DOI, so you can just leave that out also for print books. Now, technically, you're supposed to put the DOI print books in the new edition of APA. However, not every print book is going to have a DOI, and actually most of the books in the library are not going to have a DOI unless they're ebooks, and then it's kind of a 50-50 whether there will be one listed. But just remember, cite what you see. If there's no DOI, just leave it off. This is a simple citation for a print book. The next example is how to cite a journal article. So what we're going to have here for the journal article is the author's last name, comma, first initial, period, middle initial, period. Then we've got our year in parentheses, then a period. Then we have the title of our article. Remember, that's in sentence case, so we're only capitalizing the first letter of the first word, and any proper nouns. And then we've got the name of the journal in italics. So we've got the name of the journal. Then we've got the volume number in italics, issue number. So what's interesting to know here is the title of the article is in sentence case, but the title of the journal is actually in title case. So you could capitalize the first letter of every word in the journal, but not the article title. Volume number is italicized, issue number is in parentheses and a comma. Make sure you're getting the commas and the periods correct. Then we've got our page number or numbers, period. The DOI would go next, and if there's no DOI, then you could put in a link to the database permalink. And a lot of times the professors prefer the database permalink because the professor can click on the link and go directly to the article in the JU databases. Another thing I would like to mention that is not shown in this example is that you would have to use the hanging indent for the second line of your source. So if a citation goes over one line, so if it goes to 2 lines, you would just use your hanging indent. So let me show you an example of what it would look like. So see here in this example, we're only the first line of the citation is going to be all the way up to the margin, and then if it goes onto a second line, you just tab over. So it makes it look really clean in your references list. So we would have to correct that in this example. So I do want to show you some of our APA resources. So what I'd like to do now is jump out to the Swisher Library. So this is our library. It's our library homepage for Swisher Library. So our APA guide is on all of our research guides. So if you go to Research and Research Guide, we're going to have citation styles on all of our research guides. But you can also access our research guides by going to Research and Citing Sources. And then we'll click on APA Guide. We also have an MLA guide. So this is kind of a cheat sheet for citing your sources in APA format. We've got examples for different types of sources. And APA is a little bit different than MLA because with APA, you have to know the format of your source before you can cite it. So is it a journal article? Is it a book? Is it a chapter? You have to find out that first, and then you click on the example here, and it will give you an example of how to cite that source. So what I'd like to do next is show you some information here on the research guide. Formatting the author is very important because sometimes you have no author. So this gives you the rules for what to do in different situations. So sometimes with no author, remember, cite what you see. So if there's no author, you just skip it. If there's one author, you would format it like this. If there's 2 authors, you'd cite it like this. Now, it's very interesting because with the new version of APA, if you have 21 authors or more, after the 19th author, you're going to put an ellipses, which is the ... and then you're going to put the last author. So you have to credit up to 21 authors before you can, well, actually up to 19 before you put the ... So that's a lot of authors. So if you have any questions about formatting the author, check out the Formatting the Author part of the research guide. Now, again, librarians do not have all of this memorized. If we have a question about APA, we will always rely on the APA manual or this APA guide to help us when we're citing our sources, because it is impossible to memorize all of this because you want to make sure that you're always getting it correct. And with the APA manual, it's a reference book, so you can keep referencing it to make sure you're getting all of the information correct. There is a sample paper on this research guide, so if you want to see what a student paper looks like, check out the student paper here, which is in Microsoft Word format, and we also have an annotated version which details on the elements of the paper in APA format. There's also the APA Style Guide, which is a link out to the official American Psychological Association and their resources they have to help you cite in APA format. So check out the APA Style Guide, which can give you some examples and help you with citing your sources. All right, so I'm going to go back to the JU's APA Guide. There's also some additional resources. So in addition to our research guide and the APA manual, you can always check Purdue OWL. It's a free site online that you can access. Maybe if you don't have a copy of the APA manual and you just want to look up how to cite a source, you can always use our guide, or Purdue OWL has some really great examples also on their website for the online lab. If your professor is still using the 6th edition, we do have a link out to the 6th edition of APA, but this is actually a research guide for the 7th edition. And if you'd like to know the changes in the 7th edition, there's a link here that tells you the new changes with the 7th edition of APA. So what I'd like to do now is I would like to show you how we're going to cite a source in APA format. So when you're starting your references list, you want to make sure that you title your paper References. In other citation styles, they use different words. So sometimes they say bibliography, that will be Chicago style. Works cited, that will be MLA style. But for APA style, we're going to say References. So I have an example of a book and an article that I would like to cite. So let's start with the book. So the book that I would like to cite. So the first thing I want to do is I want to grab the example from our APA guide. So I'm going to go back to the library site and I'm going to look at citing a book or an ebook, and I'm going to look at an example. So we have different examples. Here's an example if it's the first edition or edition not listed. Here's an example of edition other than first. And here's an example of editor instead of an author. So I want to go back to my example and look and see if there is an edition. And I also want to look and see if there's an editor or an author. So in this example, it says by Sarah Walker. So it looks like that will be the author. It says first edition, so we're going to stick with the example for first edition. So I'm going to go back to, go back to our APA guide, and I'm going to copy the example for first edition, or edition not listed, but this one is the first edition. So I'm going to copy this example here, and then pretty much I'm just going to fill in the blanks. So because I have the format listed, I just want to make sure that I am filling in the blanks with the correct information. So remember, this would be in Times New Roman, size 12, and we're going to double space that. So I'm going to definitely double space that when I finish with my citation. So we remember that the author here is Sarah, right? Sarah Walker. So I'm going to go back to my citation. I'm going to change the author name to Walker, comma, S for Sarah, and then we don't know her middle initial, so we can actually leave that off. Cite what you see, remember? So we don't know the middle initial, so we're going to leave that out. The year for this book is 2002, so we're going to plug that in, 2002. The title of the book is Big Cats. The publisher, let's go back to our example, and in the details it will tell us the name of the publisher. So the publisher here is DK, so we're going to put that in as our publisher name. Oops, let me make sure I got that right. Yes, DK. Now I have publisher name twice here, so we actually only want to put that once. And then the DOI, or the URL or database permalink. So DOIs really came out around 2001, and they were primarily used for electronic journal articles. So in this case, if you do see a DOI, which I am not seeing one, in fact, most of the books in our library catalog will not have a DOI. So cite what you see. So if you don't see a DOI, you don't have to put that. But it is helpful to your professor to be able to go back and look at the source. So I'm going to go with the database permanent link. So each of our databases will have a permanent link listed. So in this example, we're going to click on the link here, and I'm going to copy the catalog link. So I'm going to go back to here, and instead of a DOI, I'm going to put the permanent link for the article so the professor can go back and look at it. All right, so there's our source. There's our source in APA format. Now let's cite one more source. So I'm going to go over and I want to look at this journal article. So this is from a publication called Science. And how would we cite the source? Now, you probably know that in the databases, there are these citation tools. So on the side of the item description, it says cite, and if you click on that, it will give you a sample citation in APA format. But always double check these citations, because even the database says pay special attention to personal names, capitalizations, and dates. Consult your library resources. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to copy this. Now keep in mind, when you copy, it's not going to a lot of times keep the formatting. So sometimes the italics will change when you copy and paste, and then it's still not going to be in the proper format. So we want to use this as a starting point, but we want to make sure that we're correcting it. So the first thing I see that we want to correct is we want to make sure that this is in Times New Roman. Sometimes you'll even get like a gray background when you copy and paste, so watch out for that. You want to make sure that you get rid of the gray background. And now what I want to do is I want to actually grab the example for citing a journal article from our website, and I want to just compare it and make sure that I'm getting everything correct. So there's an example for without a DOI and with a DOI. Let's go back to our article and see if there's a DOI. There is a DOI. So 7th edition of APA, they like for us to format our DOI with HTTPS. So in older editions, they formatted it differently, but now we want to format it like this. So the example we're going to use is electronic journal article from a database or website with a DOI. So I'm going to copy this example and just make sure that all of the elements are correct in our citation. So we've got the author's last name, comma, first initial, period. And now the author's going to look a little bit different than this because there's multiple authors. So if we go back to the APA guide, remember there's examples here on how to format authors if you have more than one. So technically the author would look like this if you have more than one. So we've got our period, comma, and then the ampersand. Then we've got the second author's last name, comma, first initial, and then the year. That looks good. The title of the article is in sentence case, which means only the first letter of the first word is capitalized. We've got the name of the journal in italics. We've got the volume number in italics. We've got the issue number. And we've got the page number, and we've got the DOI. So let me go ahead. The font looks a little different, so I want to make sure that's a dark font. So basically what we did was we copied this from the database, but we also compared it to our example to make sure that everything was correct, because again, the database citations are computer generated. They're not always accurate, so we want to double check that. So now we can take off these examples, and here we have our sources. Now we're not done yet. We still want to put them in alphabetical order, and so actually V comes before W, right? So we want to make sure that we're putting in alphabetical order by whatever starts the source. So remember, the citation may not start with the author. It could start with the title if there is no author. So whatever starts the source is how you're going to put these in alphabetical order. We're still not done. We want to make sure that these are double spaced, because see, the first source is not double spaced. So there is a trick on your keyboard. So if you to double space, you can on your keyboard. If you are on a PC, this will not work on a Mac, but if you hit Control and then plus the number 2, that will do your double spacing. So let's try it. So if we do highlight all of this and hit Control and the number 2, now we've got our double spacing. There's another trick, because see, the first source is 2 lines, so we have to do our hanging indent for this source. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this one, and on my keyboard I'm going to hit Control and the letter T, and that's going to do my hanging indent. So let's try it. I'm going to highlight it, hit Control and then the letter T, and there's our hanging indent. It does look a little strange here, but that's because we have this really long DOI listed here, but that's okay. We do have our hanging indent here, so everything looks good on that. So I'm going to, this is our references list. So there's our list of references that we have. One way I think we may be able to fix that is we could put this on a third line, but you do have to have that hanging indent where you're indenting over from the margin. So here's our references list. These are the two sources that we used in our paper. Now if we're going to put our in-text citation for our first source here, our in-text citation would look like this. Author's last name, comma, and then the page number. Oh, sorry, not the page number, the year. If you're referring to a specific page, you could put in the page number. But it's not required unless you're using a direct quote or citing information that you want to provide the page number for. But if you're just referring to it, if you're saying in the book, Tiger Trade threatens big cats worldwide, and actually that's a journal article. In the journal article, Tiger Trade threatens big cats worldwide. You don't necessarily have to give the page number unless you're referring to a specific section. So here are two examples of how to use your in-text citation for that first book, or journal article, excuse me. And then the second source is going to be just Walker, 2002. And if you were citing a specific part of the source, like you wanted to show them what was on page 5, then you would just put in the page number after that. I want to make sure I'm formatting those page numbers correctly because I believe I would want to put the P with it. So I'm going to go over to my in-text citations and just verify and make sure I've got it correct. So this is just some examples of how to format your in-text citation. So make sure you're also referring to this. And in fact, we do want to put in our page number. So a P if it's one page, and then PP if there's multiple pages. So I'm going to go back to my guide here. So make sure you're putting in the P if you're referring to a page number. If it was multiple pages, you could put PP period and then the page range. So those are going to be just some in-text examples. But those would not go on your references list. Those would go in the actual text of your paper. If you have questions with APA, you can always reach out to us. We have lots of ways that you can contact us at the library. You can chat with us Monday through Friday from 9 to 3. You can also use the Book a Librarian link to make an appointment to meet with a librarian. We are available to meet online through Blackboard and also through email. So what you would do is just tell us who you are, tell us what you're working on. You can request a librarian by name or say first available. It's totally up to you. My name is Nancy Tucker. If you'd like to meet with me directly, I'll be glad to meet with you. Just let us know if you'd like to meet online or by email. So definitely make an appointment if you would like to meet with a librarian. We will definitely be glad to meet with you. All right, so that's a lot of information about APA format. I hope you enjoyed this video, and feel free to reach out to us. My name is Nancy Tucker. You can also email us at library@ju.edu. But remember, you don't have to memorize everything in this manual. Just remember that if you don't know information, you know who to reach out to. You can reach out to the librarians, or you can just check the resources available online through the library, Purdue OWL, the American Psychological Association. There's lots of resources out there. Thank you for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful day.